So we got some 3 great technology companies we're going to introduce really quick to let them tell us about what they're doing. And again, this isn't about their technologies. I think a couple of them are presenting tomorrow, so you'll learn about their technologies and their products and their markets. We want to understand what are the challenges that they face today trying to break into these existing markets. They are the innovator, that the innovator's dilemma we talk about. Who can disrupt the market? There's three different companies that are going to come up here today and tell us what challenges they are facing. Because again, none of them are one of them is actually producing liquid going into some merchant supply. But I mean, when you look at Maura's graph about where the supply comes from, they wouldn't even be a blip on it because we're not there yet. But we want to support them. We want to understand it. I think Scott said it well. We need more innovation. We've got to support these guys. How do we do it? So we're going to ask them, what kind of challenges are they facing? So we're going to bring them up one at a time.
Mike Laucius, Director of Business Development, CarbonQuest. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the hot seat.
And next we have...
Which one's the hot seat?
You get to choose which seat's the hottest.
Next we have Skytree. So we have Elena Nikonova from Skytree, the direct air capture. And again, we're going to let them introduce themselves. They can tell you about what they do way better than we can. So, Elena, thank you for coming. And lastly...
Yeah, Matt Atwood
there, I was throwing it
from Air Capture. Welcome, Matt, CEO and founder. We're excited to have you today. Thank you for joining us.
So now we're just going to have panel discussion. Again, let's let you guys introduce yourselves really quick. Why don't we start with you, Michael? Michael, sorry.
I answered to both.
I answered just about anything. It's fine. I answered to food, too, so if anybody wants to bring a sandwich up, that's fine, too.
And I answered to Jeff. It's pretty simple for me, so.
Perfect. Anyway.
All right. I'm Mike Laucius. As Jeff said, I'm leading our business development efforts at CarbonQuest. We're a Spokane, Washington-based company focused on the commercial industrial space, so capturing CO2 out of the existing environment. So, you hear about hard to abate. Well, we're focused on the hard to abate, but not in the sense of, steel and cement, but other smaller scale commercial industrial that doesn't have the opportunity for whatever reasons, maybe to electrify immediately or change their infrastructure, maybe for whatever reason cost prohibitive. So we're able to do something now to help companies achieve their goals of decarbonizing. We're working on our 6th installation in New York City. As you saw on the video, that's where we began with decarbonization of some very large-scale apartment buildings. In those cases, the CO2 is being liquefied and transported to Brooklyn and injected into a carbon cure system for concrete blocks.
So you are actually capturing CO2 and redeploying and selling it back into the merchant market today.
We are.
Yeah, it's impressive. So again, still small scale, but on your 6th one already. That's great. We've known this group for when did we meet? You saw Shane and Steak and a couple of the other ones, probably 3 or 4 years now. And so they were one of the early kind of innovators in this space of capturing off of flue gas in high-rise buildings in New York City. Super impressive group. Check them out. You'll hear and learn more about them as the years continue on or the weeks continue on. Perfect. Thanks, Mike. Elena.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Elena Nikonova. I'm a VP of Strategy for Skytree. We are a Dutch company that makes decentralized direct air capture units. So I know that mostly in North America, when you hear direct air capture, you think like big plants, like something very custom. We actually have a product. It's a standard product that you can put wherever you need to either sequester or use CO2. So right now we have 5 deployments for the greenhouse and vertical farming sector, where the machines are capturing CO2 and delivering for the plants, because plants need CO2 to grow. But we actually are deploying units for all kinds of industries, like water treatment or cement, concrete, all the industries that need CO2 right at the site where they want to capture and use that CO2. Yeah.
Headquartered in Amsterdam.
Headquartered in Amsterdam. I'm based in Toronto. Our U.S. office is actually here in Nashville, opening this week.
You guys
So,
really are decentralized.
Yeah, totally, exactly decentralized, yeah.
So yeah, so we met Skytree at the Gas World CO2 Summit in Austria in Europe earlier this year. Actually, I think Luke said something really derogatory about direct air capture and how it was useless and didn't make any sense.
No, I thought I was
Something
in the same
along that line. And Rob Van Straten will be presenting tomorrow, so you'll learn a lot more about their products. But they were just standing there at the stage ready to attack us when we got off, and they're like, "What are you talking about? We're doing it today." We've really formed a great relationship and partnership with them.
This is
ever
before I realized we had the fourth leg of the stool. So I thought I was in a safe space, and now we're best friends.
Yeah, they are making. I'll oversimplify it again. Rob will speak to their products better tomorrow, but they are commercializing direct air capture today, low energy output. Still not huge amount of CO2 capture, but it's scalable and it's repeatable and it's commercialized, and that's where we're going to continue to grow. And then so next to Elena, we have Matt Atwood from Air Capture Inc. Another direct air capture. So actually very new to us. We're just getting to know them, but a lot of, fascinating stuff that they're working on as well. Matt, please.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm Matt Atwood, CEO of Air Capture. We're based in Berkeley, California. We've been developing direct air capture technologies now since about 2019, and we're delivering commercial products today. We have a modular direct air capture kind of platform where individual module sizes can deliver anywhere from 12.5 kilograms per hour up to about 125 kilograms per hour, and then they're stackable. We also develop liquefaction technologies where we can deliver kind of 5/9 liquid to our customers, and we're commercializing into a variety of different markets currently. We just delivered our first commercial facility, which is going into the Middle East for sequestration. We shipped that in July. We'll commission it in a few weeks here in October. And we're also kind of focusing on the merchant market space where we're deploying on-site solutions for CO2 liquid gas products to our customers in the beverage carb and cement and various different market applications.
I think that's interesting. Your board, senior leadership, some of them in this room have a background in industrial gas. And so, typically you do see the PhD scientists coming with direct air capture, but you guys have diversified to kind of understand the market you're targeting and have a balance of development, new technology, but also an understanding of the space you're stepping into. So I do think that's really interesting to know. You are probably the first company I've seen in the direct air capture space with that type of team.
Yeah, we're really focused on on-site merchant solutions. We think, of course, sequestration, power to liquids, e-fuels, things like this are going to be very important in the future. But that infrastructure is 5 years away. Yep. And so the question is, how do you get on the learning curve? How do you develop technology? How do you commercialize technology? And how do you build a sustainable business model to get from here to there? And some of these other, approaches in direct air capture that require very large facilities that are primarily focused on sequestration. This is, I think it's a risky model, and it's gonna, there's a lot to figure out between now and then.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah. So the premise of this panel was that we have 3 companies that are doing it today. They are producing merchant available CO2 for our markets today with new technologies at what we will believe to be a reasonably cost competitive nature. And that's what we wanted, is to hear where they're at. Now, you probably heard some of the volumes. We'll let everybody kind of speak to some of their volumes as needed. Let's talk about 0.5 ton per day. That's not replacing a 400 ton per day plant. So there's challenges that go along with it. But they're also not, we have a beta site and then we're going to go capture 10 million tons next year. They're doing it today. The next step will be 2 tons per day, 10 tons per day, 50 tons per day. I don't know. I'll let them speak to it. But that's the premise of this panel. So I'll open up with the first general question, and then whoever wants to jump in, please answer it. What's your biggest challenge? Not technically, market penetration challenge to getting your CO2 into the market. What are you facing today? Maybe we'll just start and go down.
Well, I think just navigating the market space itself, because we're looking at, for some projects we might need to go to sequestration just because of our customers' goals. So we're navigating that space, keeping an eye on the sustainable aviation fuel, how that's going to play. We've got projects that are both biogenic and non-biogenic. So just net gas from a boiler, maybe it non-biogenic, gas from a wood-fired electrical facility, generating facility would be biogenic. So looking at those different sources, a lot of the challenges are around the various regulations and policies, and that's constantly evolving, whether it's at the state level, local level. You know, as you saw from the video, we started out in New York City in anticipation of their local law 97, which taxed all the building owners on their emissions. And so that was a great start for us, but now we're moving into much larger scale projects. You know, those were probably in the 1,000 tons a year range, and now we'll look at projects a couple 100,000 tons a year of CO2. So really identifying and kind of connect at the local level, because where we develop our projects, we want to develop relationships with the end users. And I think that can be a real advantage because we're cutting out a lot of transportation if we can match up the market with our projects.
So you can have localized capture, production, use.
Right. Sustainable CO2 at a local level.
That's outstanding. Perfect. Thank you. Elena, biggest commercial challenges so far?
Yes. So I come from an EV industry, right? So I've been working there for 10 years. So, and I've talked to, I don't know, over 70 different companies, small and big, in different industries ever since that I joined Skytree. And there are two perceptions about DAC, and that is it's expensive and that it does not exist. Basically, all these large plants that we hear about, it's really seen as like something, a toy for billionaires, So one of the questions I get asked, so like how much does a ton cost? Like $1,200 or something? Well, that's actually not the reality. I mean, and I don't want to get into this discussion, what is exactly in the cost per ton, like energy, inflation, et cetera. But I mean, it's not $1,200 for us, for example. It's somewhere around $300 at the moment, and we're very quickly shaving that cost off. So, that is, I would say, the challenge, the perception around DAC because of all of these large 45Q projects that are.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting because that seems like that would be a challenge for everybody because the news is all about these big projects.
Exactly.
But it's also that we need federally funded taxes to pay for it. I can't remember, I think it was Scott, you said it earlier, that, this is a tax on all of us. Capturing the CO2 is a tax on all of us. It will go into the cost of our products, into our food, into our beverages and things like that. So if we're going to pay $85 a ton to put it into the ground, well, that doesn't go away. Direct air capture, I can't remember the number, $180 a ton, I think you get something like that. But, so getting over that hurdle, that's really interesting.
And maybe to that as well, why have we been hearing about these large sequestration projects? It's because, the IRA has been primarily sponsoring these projects and not so much utilization,
Well,
which we've
you need
slowly been seeing
12,500 tons captured a year just to receive the credits, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, great. Matt?
I mean, I would say the biggest kind of commercial challenge at the moment is, from our perspective, is getting, working with the customers to provide a longer-term contract, 10, 15-year offtake agreement for an on-site product, and convincing them to switch supply for something that's a critical commodity for their day-to-day operations. I mean, typically, when we talk to customers, CO2 represents somewhere between 1% and 5% of OpEx. So there's not a lot of interest in capitalizing equipment to address that because typically it makes more sense to invest in expansion, to invest that you get a better ROI on increasing capacity. So the sort of chicken and egg problem in our perspective is how do we finance these projects? How do we leverage project finance? What kind of insurance products do we need to put in place for the offtake supply, for the purity? And how do we feather that in to an offtake agreement where the tenor matches the requirement on the payback period?
All right, Matt, so one thing you mentioned there is trying to encourage, your end user to make the change from what they see as relatively stable supply today. Thinking that through, you have, let's say, a single unit, and this will apply to everybody, but I'll let you address this, where they may be getting supply from many different sources, and they do have a level of assurance that if there is an outage over here, they're going to get supply from over there from their supplier because they've built out that infrastructure. So how do you address when that question comes up when you're sitting down with them working through deals, an assurance of supply? Because as soon as they shut off and they make the change to work with air capture, they're not getting CO2 from anybody else.
Sure. So I think there's a couple of ways to deal with that. One is provide excess capacity for the customer. And it's a modular kind of technology. So it's unlikely, unless there's some kind of critical power failure at the plant, that we'll have a systemic downturn of the facility. So we can work on it on an engineering basis. We can solve those challenges. But we also provide, we could provide liquid tanks, and we can guarantee supply by going out and finding other supplies of CO2 to fill that need. And what we're finding in the market is, CO2 pricing varies wildly based on geography. And we have customers that are paying up to $2,200 a ton for CO2. And so they have a significant, pain point there, and they have supply disruptions regularly. So we do see certain customers in the market that are very eager to switch now, and then other customers that are taking a much longer time to really do the detailed engineering analysis and figure out how do we solve these problems.
Yeah, very interesting. So, you kind of generated a question and all that for me, for all of you. We talked about the innovator's dilemma, and at the end of the day, large companies that already have a huge market share sometimes have a hard time getting out of their own way. And the Polaroid and the digital camera, or Blockbuster and Netflix are your primary examples of something like that. In the gas world, are you being welcomed with open arms by the gas industry, or some of the gas majors that are already in this market saying, hey, let's partner, how do we work together? Or are you getting pushback, or you feel like you have to hurdle anybody? Maybe kind of start here and just work down and speak to what you can and can't. Obviously, we don't want to offend anybody.
Yeah,
I don't
no
mind
names.
offending people, but
No. Yeah, from my viewpoint, there are companies that are more progressive in this space and get it and are thinking longer term strategically and want to be in at the ground level, with new sources like CarbonQuest and our customers. I've gotten some pushback from folks that are concerned about perception of, we talked about this morning, the quality. And how are you going to ensure your beverage grade quality?
call SIG.
Call SIG, absolutely. But just overcoming that problem with perception of what the source is.
Right.
Is it better to have beverage grade CO2 from an ethanol plant versus industrial boiler?
I always like that.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest things in the beverage. Like, oh, do we want it? We don't want to know it came from farm waste in my soda. I'm like, did you really want to know that it came from an ammonia plant? We don't know where our CO2 comes from today as general consumers. I mean, we in this room know, but the general consumer has no idea. But I understand why there's a perception hurdle. So,
Yeah.
Elena, any challenges or partnerships or welcome with open arms of the industrial gas majors?
So specifically in Europe, I see, there's for example an OCAP pipeline that distributes gas, and they're just gonna they're gonna have a shortage of fossil fuel gas very soon, and they gotta fill that up with something, right? And that's kind of like we come in as Skytree that will be building a large DAC hub to fill up that pipeline so that they don't have that.
So that pipeline aggregates various sources and supplies of CO2 and then distributes.
Correct.
That's it. Yeah, we do not have that here.
Yeah. I think there's one actually announced in Iowa pretty recently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Very interesting. Matt?
Well, we've seen some of the projects that we're looking at, we can overproduce CO2, and we've had interest from industrial gas companies in certain geographies to have interest in off-taking some of that supply in places where it's really hard to get the CO2 that has to be transported long distances. I think generally speaking, our view is it's highly unlikely that kind of incumbent industrial gas supply companies are going to be eager to kind of cannibalize their logistics infrastructure. So they're going to, I think that this market, on-site CO2 production, will have to grow pretty substantially before I think the incumbent suppliers really see this as an attractive alternative to the businesses that they already have in place.
I do wonder if we see like a divergence where, these gases are commodities and gas suppliers are supplying a lot more than just CO2. But now with the peaked interest from Microsoft, from Google, and trading credits, and does it just become a whole separate industry where, you know, there is a clear divide? And that's kind of a rhetorical question, but it's just, things have shifted so greatly from what the core business was, and seeing investment from tech, VC getting involved, it just feels so different.
Well, maybe I'll go out on a limb and say something a little bit controversial here and take issue with one of the last slides that you showed, which is, you know, something like 97% of CDR sales are undelivered. So this is a massive bubble. A lot of these CDR sales, none of them are sales. These are all forward purchase obligations. And so what the market is doing is, you know, the Microsofts and Amazons and, you know, Shopify's of the world are saying, we're gonna buy these credits, and then the DAC companies are saying, okay, we sold these carbon credits, but that's not true. That's not revenue. It's a forward purchase obligation. And a lot of these technologies are high risk, low TRL, you know, haven't commercialized. And so I think what we're gonna see is a large percentage of this CDR forward purchase offtake become just ultimately not delivered. They won't be delivered at the prices. The companies won't be able to, you know, to generate profitability from these things. And I think it's, you know, we're a couple of years away from seeing the sort of burst of this market dynamic, you know, which is great because we have Microsofts of the world and others saying, we really want to support this nascent industry. And then you have Shopify's of the world and Frontiers putting together kind of 5-7 year offtake agreements. But that's typically not enough for project financing. So who's going to take the risk on those extra couple of years? So I do think there's a big mismatch, and I definitely think there's going to be a correction in the next couple of years relative to CDR stuff.
They make for really great headlines, though.
Just this morning, I mean, right? We saw Frontier buyers announce $4.5 million of credits purchased from different technologies. 2 of them DAC, 2 of them U.S. based, none of them on stage. Sold for $500 a ton and $1,950 a ton. And I don't necessarily think that was the cost to produce, but it's just a forward-based credit. We're going to get there. But that, I mean, that news just broke prior to us stepping up here. So,
Actually, just to that point, actually most of the credits are bought by one company and Microsoft, right?
Yeah,
I
and
think like
97, that's a
something
great number. 97% are unfulfilled. But you know,
Yeah.
they keep growing the number and growing the big pool, but they're not actually fulfilling it because they're not. And once they start doing it, if I hear you correctly, you don't think they'll be able to do it at the cost they expected to do it, and therefore they won't fulfill it at all because they'll be losing money every time they fulfill a credit. Is that kind of what you're thinking today?
Yeah, I mean, some will and some won't. Yeah. But I think that those that don't will hurt the industry.
All right, Elena, anything to add to that one?
And I just wanted to add that exactly. So Microsoft is buying is actually right now buying all the credits, and I don't know if anybody read the recent SBTI report, but it's you know, there's going to be maybe a dip in the VCM market in total, and that's why I think this conversation is so important, because it's not just about the volunteer carbon market and selling carbon credits, but CO2 as making a valuable product out of CO2.
well, and I think Jeff and I believe in that bubble to a degree as well, where the conversation is utilization. And you 3 are differentiated in the sense that you're anchoring to that. You're not selling carbon credits. You're trying to get into utilization of CO2. But I want to address this head on. Selling a credit at $1,950 and somebody in the Corn Belt paying $150 per ton of CO2. And you're saying, Elena, DAC exists. That we're past that. That's not the question anymore. Convince me that DAC can be viable at a cost that's reasonable. Jeff predicted the price of CO2 is going to change. Well, I think we all believe that. It won't be $150, but it's not going to be $1,900. So if you each would kind of talk through your technology, where are you today on a cost per ton basis? And then how does that scale short term, medium term?
Right. So the $950, that we're talking about these custom projects that are being built. And, you know, because they're custom and engineered, that's where you get that cost from. So, I mean, there are a couple of things on the how do we scale that down. Right? The first one is energy. So we all know DAC, right, you know, energy intensive. So how do we, you know, besides obviously, you know, building a more renewable grid, how do we scale that down? One of the ways is, for example, using alternative sources of energy like heat, like industrial waste heat or geothermal. We are, for example, designing a unit that takes industrial waste heat as its energy source. So the first one is energy. The second one is make standard product. When you make a standard product, it's much easier to get that cost down, you know. And then the final one, and I think you you kind of touched upon that, is deployments. Have like smaller deployments, because it's only through those deployments that you can actually learn and innovate and make your product much better. So yeah.
Mike, anything to add?
Yeah, $1,900 a ton. It's signing up all day. We'll make any project work. But, you know, our projects, you know, we've been below the 45Q threshold, so we're working, you know, without those credits. You know, as we get into some bigger projects, that'll of course help. But really, the economics of matching up with the distributors and utilization to make the economics work. And I think, as somebody pointed out, you know, trying to get to those longer-term contracts so that we can match up the economics of a project with the buyer's needs will generate more projects, more CO2 in the market.
Perfect. Let's close up with one last question that kind of feeds into all of that. I'll ask each of you to make a prediction into your crystal ball. But you know, I personally am not a believer of subsidies and tax credits and things like that. They're a bridge, they're a runway to get us to the technology, so they're necessary. 45Q, 45V, all of these things are necessary in hydrogen and CO2. They get us to a point, but you can't build a business model where that is forever, right? So in your world, I know, I know a little bit about all your business models. I don't think you are all very much in need of any of these credits, or like you said, you're under the threshold anyway in a lot of these individual projects. What is your projection? Very one word answer or two word answer of how long will it take for you to get to that cost level where you can be profitable without any tax incentives, any federal subsidies? 1 year, 5 year, 10 years. How long before you believe that you will be somewhere close to break even?
I think we're there in terms
Wow.
of, you know, where we need to be to make projects work. So otherwise, we wouldn't have any customers signing up for these projects to start with, because we don't have those subsidies. Some of it's, you know, in cases you're trading off cost avoidance or penalty avoidance, so that comes into the economics as well. But you know, we believe we're the lowest levelized cost of carbon capture out there.
Wow, outstanding.
And you know, we're making improvements, and as our sources are evolving, as we've gone from, you know, a boiler in an apartment building to looking at different sources like combined heat and power, district energy, fuel cells, where you can get CO2 sources, emission sources that are much higher concentration, then our process becomes much more efficient and economical, especially sources that run continuously.
But you're already there. That's outstanding. Elena, Skytree, how long?
I know you want like a one line, like a one word, right?
I just said two, one or two.
So
Mike used like 10. You got have 8.
So are we there yet? I mean, yes, because we have deployments. Is that everywhere? No. I mean, in some markets it totally makes sense, you know. In Australia, where they pay like what, $1,200, $1,500 per ton of CO2, that totally makes sense there, right? In some states where they're like paying upwards of like $700 a ton, absolutely. So it definitely makes sense. It's just right now it's a question of geography, industry, right? So. And then with those incentives, which I totally agree with you, it should not, you know, it shouldn't like be there always, but it's kind of a Kickstarter for these, you know, for companies like us to, you know, to get there, and for it to be affordable.
Matt?
I would say we're there now as well. I think our estimate is we can probably address about 10% of the merchant CO2 market at our current costs, and we're driving those costs down substantially over time. We think, you know, by exiting next year, we'll be in a very cost competitive place relative to a large chunk of the market. But I would say, you know, I think it's important, you know, I do think that government subsidies are really critical to de-risk early stages of the technology, and that's a good place for that kind of effort. And, you know, we need to compete on a level playing field. I mean, oil and gas is subsidized roughly 100 times between exploration and the pump. So, you know, I think that, in order for these nascent technologies to develop, they have to become financeable, bankable, and they have to be appropriately risk mitigated. And it's a complicated analysis to put that all together.
Outstanding.
Yeah, you know what? Really excited y'all are up here, and tomorrow you'll get to hear Matt talk about their technology and Rob with Skytree and understand more about direct air capture. But really, this is the first time where we're opening up to a larger audience here in the U.S., and it's crazy to hear we're there, right? I mean, this is not pie in the sky, but rather there are deployments, action is being taken. We are big advocates for the use of CO2, Jeff and myself. We love it. We don't want to just see sequestration. We want to see new products. We want to see the pie as a whole grow. And I do believe that there is room for everybody to be involved. So please, stop by, talk with these fine folks out at the booths and walking around, use that time tonight. But these conversations have to happen for the greater good of everybody in this market as it really starts to shift.
Yeah, no, I know you have recently closed Series A funding. I'm going to guess the other two on the panel are always interested in raising funds as well. So go speak to them. If you believe they're already there, then that's something really investable, and I think that's super impressive. So.